That's okay. Wanted to say welcome to everyone. My name is Walt Marchbanks. I'm the Passenger Programs and Services Manager. I know all of you in the room at this point, but welcome. We're live here at the Port Headquarters building. This is the second hybrid event that we've done this way, where we've been able to live stream and then also have a live audience, which is great. We're really grateful for the community's vaccination effort that really made this all possible. Ultimately, that's really why we're here today. So as we've been doing throughout the pandemic, we're going to continue to follow the guidance of our public health partners as we move ahead with events and so forth. So this is a great opportunity to share some of the wonderful customer service stories that we've received over the past quarter, which is amazing. And this event is really focused on the folks that are in the room. It's the award winners that are here. Thank you, congratulations. This is really all about you, and this is really focused on you. Once a quarter, we're able to recognize representatives from across all the industries that we have here at the airport. We have 9 industries, and we see a good representation here in this room today. So for those of you who haven't attended this event before, it's really broken into 2 parts. So the first piece, we've got a great presentation that we're going to play by Chuck Bernsohn, who's a disability and gender inclusivity expert. And Chuck's going to give us some great tools that are going to help us make PDX more inclusive and accessible, which is really important to everyone. We're also going to hear from Mindy Coolidge and Aaron Ray, who are representatives of the Port of Portland's LGBTQ+ employee resource group as well. So following their presentation, we're going to have our awards piece. And if you're welcoming us from home, which again, this is going to be recorded and not necessarily streamed live, but please drop us a like and share this with your friends and loved ones who can also be part of the ceremony. So now, as you may know, PDXPEOPLE program is what this is all about. Our core customer service values are part of the culture at PDX. We're friendly, we're knowledgeable, and we're respectful. But I encourage everyone to think of respect in the context of being inclusive and having an inclusive environment. Differences are always welcomed and encouraged at PDX, and we want everyone to feel welcome while they're traveling through or working at PDX. It's these reasons that we've decided to partner with Chuck, Mindy, and Aaron Ray as this portion of the program. Chuck Bernsohn is a passionate advocate for the LGBTQ+ and chronic illness communities. Chuck also facilitates accessible conversations around inclusivity, privilege, and the intersectionality and creative power of language. They come to this work with personal life experience as a disabled, non-binary queer person with a background in gender studies. Chuck recently relocated to Massachusetts, where they live with their partner and their yellow-eyed dog. Chuck is available for consultation and training for organizations and families alike, and their offerings can be found at www.chuckbernsohn.com. I'd also like to thank Mindy and Aaron Ray, who engaged in this work. So this piece was pre-recorded. It's going to be about 20 minutes long, so I hope you enjoy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mindy Coolidge. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the co-lead of the Port's LGBTQX+ and Friends Employee Resource Group.
Hello, everybody. My name is Aaron Ray. I use he, him pronouns, and with Mindy, I am the other co-lead of our Employee Resource Group. And we'd like to welcome everybody.
So, Aaron, why is an inclusive workplace important?
I think we can all agree that creating an environment where people can bring their authentic selves to work is essential. Think about how much of our life we spend at work. Think about how much of ourselves we bring to our teams. It makes good business sense to enable people to be their authentic selves. It increases satisfaction, it improves collaboration, and in long term, it increases employee retention.
So, Aaron, what makes inclusion at PDX unique?
Well, at PDX, part of our mission, a big part of our mission, is connecting people with the world. So we need to understand and acknowledge the needs of everyone that we serve, including the travelers who come through the airport. If we're inclusive, then we're meeting our customers where they are, and we're giving them a welcoming place to be. And when you think about it, that's really what PDXPEOPLE are all about.
Well, we are thrilled to introduce Chuck Bernsohn, who is an accessibility consultant and an advocate for the LGBTQX+ community and the chronic illness community. They have provided trainings and consultancy for the Port, most notably recently when we opened the rental car center. Chuck worked with our change ambassadors as they were unveiling our first ever gender inclusive restrooms in the RCC building. Chuck is here today to give us a crash course on gender inclusivity in customer service. Without further ado, Chuck.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that introduction, Mindy. I am very happy to be here with you all today, and it has been such a pleasure working with the Port so far. I have had a lot of personal experience of discomfort in airports, and it is so happy-making for me that I know that you are all doing this work and are committed to creating an environment where employees and customers feel really safe and affirmed in the Portland Airport. So thank you for taking the time to join us today. A bit about me. Mindy introduced me. Thank you again for that. And I want to just share that I do this work both with organizations and companies and also with families and therapists. Gender is a really deeply personal identity and one that we all experience in very different ways. And so I am so happy always to be able to help facilitate the creation of more easeful and safe spaces for people across the gender spectrum. A bit of my own experience in airports that I'll share more of as we go through. Airports, as a trans and non-binary person, are a really difficult space to navigate. You have many moments where you have to show your ID, and for many of us, myself included, the marker for our gender on our ID don't necessarily match our held gender identity. There's scans and body pats and public restrooms. There's a lot of reinforcing of the gender binary that happens in public spaces in general, but really specifically in airports. So I'm so excited to have an opportunity to work with you all to see how we can really shift some of the pain and discomfort that gender expansive people experience at the airport. So I will go through a good number of terms here. And again, I hope that some of these sound familiar to you and that we can reinforce some of those terms for you today. And perhaps some of these will be new for you. I think they're really essential terms for talking to people in your life about gender, and also to make sure that when I'm going through the rest of my talk, I'm really sure you are understanding how and why I'm using these terms. So the first distinction I want to be sure to make is between sex and gender. Sex are the biological characteristics of hormones, chromosomes, reproductive organs, secondary sex characteristics like facial hair, etc., that we have been taught are two very clean buckets, right, of male and female. I'll get into it in a moment how it's much more complicated than that. But gender, on the other hand, is the meaning that we ascribe to those characteristics. It's the meaning that we ascribe to maleness and femaleness, to certain body parts, to certain voices, etc. Gender is also a place in which people can perform, right, their own identity internally and their relationship to those sex characteristics. That comes out in the clothes people choose to wear, how they choose to cut their hair, makeup, jewelry, all of that fun stuff are ways that we express our gender to the world. Trans and cis, you'll hear me say transgender and cisgender, or just trans people and cis people, either is perfectly wonderful. Transgender people are simply people who do not identify with the gender assignment they were given at birth, right? Somebody was born, a doctor looked at their body and said, this person is a male or a female. And there were a lot of gender norms, right, that were then ascribed to those two sex buckets of different sex characteristics. Cisgender people, on the other hand, are simply people who identify with that assignment. They were perhaps assigned female at birth, and they identify as a girl. They feel good with a lot of the social norms of being a girl. They identify with media representations of girls, etc. Intersex people are people who are born with biological traits that cannot be cleanly categorized into male or female. We can see that spectrum of sex characteristics outside of intersex people as well. For instance, there are people who were assigned female at birth, who identify as female, who are not intersex, who naturally grow facial hair. And we need to make sure that we're building systems of protection for everybody in that gender and sex binary. Gender expression and gender identity are two terms that I often see conflated, and I think the distinction is very important. So gender identity is your internal understanding of your gender. It's the meaning you put, perhaps, on the sex characteristics you have. It's the way that you feel internally about your gender. Gender expression, on the other hand, is the way that you present your gender to the world. And for many reasons, these two don't always align, right? For instance, in terms of safety, there's many people who don't feel safe enough to fully express their gender. There are also people whose understanding of their gender shifts day to day, and their expression will shift right along with that identity shift. And it can make it very difficult then to look at somebody and know what their gender identity is. And for most of us, we're taught from a very, very young age that you can look at somebody and you can know their gender and you can know the words that they identify with. And I really want to encourage you to focus on the moments you're doing this throughout your day, to see the moments in which you're looking at a stranger and saying, that's a woman or that's a man. And think about why you're doing that. Is it the way they're dressed? Is it the sound of their voice? Is it the job that they're in, etc.? So this distinction will be really relevant as we move forward throughout this conversation. Pronouns, as many of us learned when we were in English class growing up, are terms that we sub in for nouns. She, he, they, it, etc. They make English run much smoother, and many languages throughout the world use pronouns in order to reduce the number of times you're saying the same noun over and over again. As Mindy and Aaron both beautifully demonstrated before, pronouns are a representation, perhaps, of someone's gender identity. And you cannot look at somebody and know their pronouns, just as you cannot look at someone and know their gender identity. So a best practice here I really want to encourage is anytime someone needs to know your name, assume they also need to know your pronoun. And this can be as simple as adding your pronouns to your badge at work, if that is allowable in the department you're in. It can be saying them verbally, like Mindy and Aaron did, introducing themselves. And it can be in written communication, in your email, etc. But really normalizing that for yourself can make it easier and safer for the people around you to be clear with you about what their pronouns are as well. Finally, two terms that you will hear me use throughout the rest of our time together, degender and misgender. I'm going to talk about degendering specifically in terms of language. So to degender your language is to remove gender terminology. It is to say to a group of people, perhaps, hello you all, instead of hello ladies. It's taking away those binary terms that we're so used to using day to day. Misgendering is a term that I have struggled to explain to people who have never experienced it. What I will say is it is experience of not being seen. Misgendering is simply identifying somebody as a gender they do not identify with. So that can be calling somebody a man or a woman who does not identify as such, or it can be using the incorrect pronoun for somebody. Misgendering is a deeply painful experience in my experience, and I encourage you to look for other voices in the trans and gender expansive community on social media, and there's amazing books that exist now to get a better sense of what this experience feels like if you're not someone who has experienced it yourself. The social construction of gender. So this is something that I think is important as a groundwork before we dive into any best practices, to get on the same page about the ways in which our norms and expectations of gender are really shaped by the society in which we live. So this social norms of gender, right? The social creation of gender is a bit of an abstract term. So I wanted to really visualize it for you all. Our understanding of gender is shaped by so many things around us. And it's really shaped from the moment we come into the world, right? We get that assignment instantly. And all of you who have children know, right, the second question anybody asks you after they ask you your child's name when they're first born is what their gender is. And that assignment really shapes the messaging we get in our internal family structures, from our friends, in the school systems, at work. It is the expectations put on us. It shapes what emotions we're allowed to express safely. It shapes what jobs we think we're allowed to have. It shapes what sort of authority we're allowed to take. And all of this messaging is coming at us all day long. And I say this in part so that you can start to pay attention to it in your day-to-day life, but also so you can get a little glimpse into how much messaging trans and gender expansive people are getting that are challenging their gender experience and reinforcing that gender binary. Two big points I want to highlight on here are geography and time. Where you are born and when you are born deeply shapes the ways in which your gender is allowed to be expressed and the expectations put on you about your gender. We know that throughout time and continuing to this day, Indigenous communities throughout the world have had a multitude of gender identity markers. Rarely are there simply male and female categories. And I say this because for many of you, this might feel like something very new, sort of coming out of left field. I want to acknowledge that these ideas of gender expansiveness have really existed for a very long time and continue to exist throughout the world. I also want to highlight geography because what it means to be a woman in perhaps New York City in the country looks very different than what it looks like to be a woman in Pakistan or Nigeria or France, right? The cultural expectations of how you present, what clothes you wear, what you do with your body hair, what you do with your makeup, looks very different from place to place and from time to time. I say all of this in large part to help you remember when you are challenging yourself to think more expansively about gender, to remember that you were taught what gender means, and the person next to you was taught perhaps a very different idea of what gender means. You, for example, might think that the norm is for men to never wear skirts, right? In the culture you were raised in, that was the cultural expectation and the cultural norm. The person standing next to you might come from a culture in which skirts were worn by everybody growing up, and that is perfectly normal to them to see in a public space. I also want to say all of this to again reiterate this idea that because we all have different notions of what gender means and looks like, you cannot look at somebody and know their gender identity. You cannot look at somebody and know their pronouns, and you cannot look at somebody and know whether they want you to refer to them with one gender marker or another. Let's jump into a few best practices for addressing gender expansiveness at the airport and in your internal teams. I so wish I had like a 3-point easy guide to give you of every situation. Unfortunately, it's much more nuanced than that. As you maybe have picked up on, right? Gender is a deeply complicated and deeply personal identity. I'm going to give you a few suggestions, and I hope that you will take these and to both work, but also into your personal life, and to see the moments in which you can help people of all genders feel more affirmed and celebrated in your life. I also just want to highlight before we jump into these that while certainly trans people, non-binary people, gender expansive people are the focus of today's talk, look at the people in your life, look at yourself, and see the ways that people across the board, cisgender and otherwise, do not fall cleanly into these categories of male and female. The way people choose to dress, the voice people have, the facial hair people have, the roles that people have, all of these pieces, all of that messaging we're getting about what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, for most people is more complicated than that. The biggest piece that I want to encourage you to use, and I think this is especially important when working with customers at the airport, is to degender your language, to write that term again, to take the gendered terminology out of your day-to-day language. And I encourage you to pay attention today or throughout the week as you're going about your day. How often do you sub in a gendered term, right? And that could be identifying somebody as a man or a woman. That could be addressing a group, right? Using ladies or guys or some of these other gendered terms we use all the time in English. And think about what terms you could sub in, right? Think about whether or not that term is actually giving you any more information about that person, right? What changes if you say, right, there's a person walking across the street with their kid, versus saying there's a woman walking across the street with her daughter, right? Is there more information or less information that you're conveying? This is also a really important step to take when you're dealing with customers. Again, to say hello, ladies, to a group of people does not actually convey any different information than just saying hello, right? And what you might be doing in that moment is misgendering someone in that group and creating a small fissure in their sense of safety in that space and in their sense of connection to you, right? We're much more likely to be honest and connected to people who we feel seen by, right? I think in the introduction, right, we talked about that a little bit, right? Bringing your full self to work and bringing your full self to relationships in public, right? In customer service, especially. Being able to feel seen by the person you're talking to will allow for much more honest and direct communication. Really taking a moment to look at the times in which your gendered options are not optional. I'll get into an example in a moment. And really taking the time to explain, whether it's to your coworker, your employee, or a customer, why you can't avoid asking for that gendered information. One of the examples that came to mind as I was working on this, I cannot tell you how long I've spent like this in an airport, standing in a scanner. For those of you who work security, you know, right? There are two buttons on those beautiful scanners. There's a male and female button. And for people like me who throughout my life, long before I identified as trans and knew I was trans, have presentations of gender that are difficult for people to categorize specifically into male or female, it's really difficult to navigate security. And so something I really encourage you to do with that specific example, if you're unsure of which button to push, I promise you it is not the first time that person has had that issue in the airport, and certainly not the first time they've been challenged in their gender presentation in public spaces. Simply poke your head in and say, I'm sorry to ask, I have only a male or female button I have to press. Can you tell me which option to select in order to get the most accurate read? There is a lot you can do to create a sense of trust and security just through acknowledging these moments in which we have to ask for gendered information from people who are perhaps difficult to categorize into these buckets we've been told are very clear and clean. Making mistakes. One of the best practices I always like to talk about in my trainings is how to fail. I call it failing gracefully because there is an inevitability to making mistakes when you are doing equity work. If we're doing equity work well, we are centering the voices of people who are most marginalized and oppressed by society. And people's needs shift. So in order to stay up to date with equity work, in order to do this work well, we have to be willing to make mistakes and we have to be willing to learn from those mistakes. The first step is simply getting comfortable with the idea of making mistakes. And that I know from experience is not a light switch we can flip. It takes months, if not years of work. But part of what helps me deal with mistakes that I make is knowing that I'm not going to learn if I'm spiraling into shame. From a neuropsych perspective, our brains basically shut down when we're experiencing shame. So if you, for example, misgender somebody and you instantly say, oh, I'm a horrible person, I'm terrible, I know I've been working on this, but I just keep messing it up, right? You're locked in shame. Taking a moment to take a deep breath and saying, there's that mistake I knew was coming, can launch you out of that place of shame and can give you the opportunity to actually learn from that mistake and to make a different mistake next time. Another big piece of this is acknowledging that impact and intent don't always align, often don't align, unfortunately, right? Any mistake you've made, you did not intend to make, right? It happens all the time, especially when we're communicating with others. And this is important to acknowledge, both because it can help you shift away from shame, but also because we need to really be focusing on the impact, right? If you misgender a customer, for example, while you're working, while you may have had the best intentions to not do that, they're still experiencing pain or discomfort because of that misgendering. And what matters in that moment is creating a space for them to recover from that and feel safe again. And then for you to take that intention back with you to doing the work, to making a different mistake next time, to making, make new mistakes is what I encourage you to do. This vein, it's really important to remember that when someone is correcting you, they're giving you a gift. It can feel like you're in trouble, but what that person is actually saying to you is, I care enough about myself and I care enough about my connection to you to correct you and to make sure that you're seeing me for my full self. Finally, this is something that will most likely be more useful to your internal co-working experience than perhaps those brief customer-facing moments you have. But here are some steps I really encourage you to take when it comes to making mistakes, right? How do we recover then from those mistakes? Number one, very well could be useful with a customer, right? If you misgender somebody, if you use somebody's incorrect name, pronoun, etc., be really specific in your apology, right? Think for a moment to a time in your life, right, when someone has said, oh, I'm sorry to you, right? Was it more impactful for them to say, I'm sorry, or for them to say, I'm sorry for X, right? Be as specific as you can be. I'm sorry for misgendering you. Take responsibility, right? This is not a good moment to say, oh, I'm really trying and I've got an old brain and I'm working on it, right? You made a mistake. Nothing wrong with it. We all do it, but it's important to acknowledge that harm has been incurred on the other end of that mistake. This is then a wonderful moment to express some appreciation for that gift someone gave you. And this is not specific to misgendering, right? This is sort of across the board. If somebody gives you feedback about a way that you are interacting that does not feel good to them, thank them for that, because they're showing you they have an investment in your connection and in your relationship. And then finally, reinforcing that idea of centering impact and not intent, right? The worst kind of an apology is, I didn't mean to, right? We don't mean to make mistakes, but the pain and harm is still real and there. Asking what that person needs from you can be a wonderful step to take in repairing that relationship and to repair that person's sense of safety and security in the workplace or in the airport. And what that person might need from you may be space. And that, again, is not punishment. That's them taking the time they need to feel safe and secure. And hopefully they will come back to that relationship renewed, and you will then have the space to do the work you need to do to make sure that you are not misgendering that person the next time you see them. That is all we have for today, this brief time together. I thank you all so much for investing your energy and time in this really, really vital work. And I just want to express personal appreciation for the safety that you are helping to foster at the Portland Airport. Thank you.
All right. So I think, I've personally been guilty of, running down the concourse, ma'am, you've dropped your purse. And, I've also referred to groups of people as, hey guys, and I'm becoming more internally aware of that so that I don't run the path of misgendering. And I know it's something that we can all work on. And I also acknowledge the fact that everybody is on a journey when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And the port is working alongside of our partners, our business partners. Tender Loving Empire is a great example where I know that, your group has done a lot of great gender equity work and equity work in general. So, I just think that this is a great way to sort of shine some light on something that ultimately I think a lot of us just aren't super familiar with. So it was really great to be part of this and have some dialogue with Chuck and other folks on our team so that I can move along with my journey as well. So thanks to Chuck. I know that we're not live streaming, but it was really great working with Chuck, Mindy, and Aaron Ray on that portion of the event. So without any further ado, we've reached the awards part of the presentation, what we've all been waiting for. So I'd like to take an opportunity to welcome our working committee members to the front of the room. So we're going to follow a slightly different track than we've done before. In the past, it's been either myself or Shannon MacArthur that have read the great stories. So this time, we're actually going to have some folks from our working committee that are going to read those great customer service stories. So without any further ado, I'd like to bring up Therese Chaplain with Dollar Rent-A-Car, who's going to read the first nomination. So come on up, Therese. And I'm going to advance the slides, so just go ahead and read right through. Yeah, have good fun.
In the airline category, Jose Aguilar.
Jose's not here today, but we're going to go ahead and
Okay,
read Jose's story anyway. So, Jose, here you go.
I just saw Jose Aguilar jump literally into action when a passenger got into trouble on the escalator. Jose was on an escalator headed from baggage claim to the ticketing level. On the adjacent escalator, a family with little kids and very large bags was headed from baggage claim to the ticketing level just a few steps ahead of Jose. One of the passengers' purse got jammed and began pulling her backwards down the steps. Jose saw what was happening and jumped to the bottom of the escalator he was on and pressed the emergency stop. The passenger regained her balance and nobody was hurt thanks to Jose's swift actions. Way to go, Jose.
Let's give Jose a round of applause.
We see that at the car rental center. The escalators that can be a pretty dangerous place, so yay for him. So. In the rental car category, my favorite category, this is for Caitlin Herpel and for Pamela Lopez.
Come on up with Caitlin and Pamela.
Our customer Lee F. from Tucson, Arizona sent the following comments regarding the service she received. Pamela and Caitlin both provided superior customer service. They both went above and beyond to ensure we had a rental car. Pamela assisted me with a reservation the day prior to arriving. My daughter and I were experiencing all kinds of flight delays, and instead of our planned 10:30 p.m. arrival, we were bumped to 1:30 a.m. and assumed that Dollar would already be closed. Pamela talked to Caitlin, and she agreed to stay an extra 30 minutes to ensure we had our vehicle. Both listened and were understanding of my situation and willing to make sure I would have a car when I eventually arrived. Thank you, Caitlin and Pamela, for caring enough to make sure this worked out for us. I appreciate you both for helping to make a very long, difficult day of travel end on a pleasant note. It was priceless. I will be referring everyone to Dollar.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Congratulations.
Hi, everybody. My name is Francesca Becker, and my pronouns are she, her. I have the honor of reading, thank you, Waltz.
Of course.
Of reading my favorite category, the federal category. So at the federal category this quarter, I have David Budnick. This nomination came to us from Christine Brittner from Southwest Airlines, which is awesome. I'm writing to share an experience I had with one of your remarkable employees, David Budnick, on Friday, September 3rd. One of our passengers was inconvenienced when her flight to Denver was canceled. The next best option was the next flight departing 7 hours later. That would have not gotten the passenger to Denver in time for her early morning cancer treatment. As she broke down in tears, I was able to find her a flight departing in 20 minutes. I escorted her through the express lane at the checkpoint. That's where we encountered Mr. Budnick. In our haste, I failed to see that she was enrolled in TSA PreCheck. David immediately noticed that she was PreCheck and took her over to the PreCheck line. Not only did he guide her through the line, but he also pointed her in the right direction for her gate. I touched bases with the gate agent and learned that she had actually made the earlier flight and got to Denver with plenty of time to prepare for her important appointment in the morning. When I later went back to the checkpoint to seek out David, he told me that it was all in a day's work. I just wanted you to know that Mr. Budnick takes a lot of pride in his work, and it continues to make a difference in many people's lives every day. Thanks, David.
All right. Everyone else with David.
And thanks, Christine. All right, next in the concessions, food, and beverage category, I have Juana Antonio from Keeper's Cafe, and this is a really fun one. I just had the best service at Keeper's Cafe. Juana allowed my grumpy self to be seated as she was closing, so sorry, and then quickly served me a drink and sandwich. She was super friendly, super professional, and helped turn my cruddy day around. She was a stellar server, and I appreciated the heck out of her going out of her way to get a less than pleasant, stressed out customer exactly what he needed. If I were still in business, I would poach Juana immediately. She is that good. Thank you, Juana, and thanks, Keepers, for hiring so well. The people truly make a difference, and the business, and you did a great job hiring. So thanks, Juana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Augie Rebello. I am the general manager here at Tender Loving Empire. Right now, I am reading a nominee for the concessions and retail category. And first up is Maggie Surgeon of Tender Loving Empire. On September 8th, Maggie was crossing the long-term parking garage heading into their shift when a PDX passenger approached them. Maggie realized the passenger was choking and could not breathe. Maggie quickly performed the Heimlich maneuver and dislodged the food that the person was choking on. The customer was beyond grateful to Maggie for helping them in such a panicked state. Maggie then went out of their way to help this frazzled passenger make it to the ticket booth and check in for their flight on time. Not only is Maggie a wonderful employee in person, but they went out of their way that day to help a passenger in a way that could have ultimately saved their life. Maggie's efforts demonstrated excellent customer service to one of our passengers, and it's an example of a true PDX spirit. Next up, I have Peter Berezynski from Grand Transportation. Somebody wrote in, my husband and I were trying to find parking in the blue lot September 24th at 5 p.m. The driver of bus 635, Peter, caught our attention and notified us that there were no parking spots available where we were searching. He encouraged us to follow him to the red lot to find open parking sections in E, F, and H. He was very kind to us and to the others he was assisting. Furthermore, he waited to take us all to the terminal. The driver's actions were excellent, and he should be commended for going above and beyond. This is written by customer Deborah B. Thank you, Peter.
Hi, everyone. My name is James Swally. I'm the general manager for Hudson Group here. First up in the port services category, we have Ann Elliott. So here's a story about her. Hello, my name is Zhihong Huang, and I am writing to express my deepest gratitude for the airport's help, especially Ann Elliott, with regards to my recent airport experience. I came from New York with my wife's 76-year-old mother so she could visit her old friends in Portland. While waiting to pick up our rental car, I discovered that my driver's license was missing. The most likely explanation was that when I grabbed the documents from the item bin at the TSA security checkpoint in Newark, I somehow dropped my license. As we were rushing out to catch our flight at PDX, I hastily put away all the documents without double checking. Without my license, I could not pick up my car and would have to change various plans for the weekend, including my plans to visit an old friend in Eugene first thing Sunday morning. I filed a request with the New York DMV to replace my license, and they issued me a temporary license electronically. Unfortunately, the car rental company would not accept an electronic document and required me to print it out. I came over to the terminal for help and found Ann Elliott. She first tried the information booth, which could usually help with such a need, but unfortunately, they had stepped away from the booth. She then tried to print the two documents at the booth without success, and then finally she went over to another office and printed the documents for me. Without her diligent help and warm support, I would not have been able to complete my trip as planned. I am forever grateful to her and the airport staff in general for making us feel welcomed and cared for. A great story. Good job, Ann. Next up in support services, we have Guyla Hines. So here's a story about Guyla. Guyla Hines is absolutely amazing. That's it. That's the story. No, there's more. I was having a difficult time at the airport during my visit. I went through the wrong security checkpoint, and when I realized my error, I exited the concourse. After exiting, I realized that I left my carry-on bag behind. I was nearly in tears after considering that if I had to go through security 2 more times, I would likely miss my flight. Never fear, Guyla Hines is to the rescue. She graciously went through the security, and after discovering that my luggage wasn't there and where I said it was, at Capers, she knew to check at the TSA supervisor podium, where she located my missing suitcase. It was just a nondescript black bag with no name tag, so I didn't give her much to work with. It's just like my bag. After a short time, I saw her coming around the bend with my bag. She followed protocol and had me verify the contents in my bag before releasing it to me. I then went through the correct security checkpoint and onto my flight. I am so incredibly grateful to Guyla Hines. She is a rock star. Thank you, Guyla.
Yes, you are. All right. Next, in the team award category, we're going to have Robert Lohr, Milagro Mejivar, and Francis Evanato, who's not with us. Come on up, the 2 of you anyway. You know, they say that it takes a village, and this is just a clear demonstration of that particular trait. So I'm going to go ahead and read the story. So Milagro observed a large group of roughly 60 passengers at the United ticket counter. She approached the group and quickly learned that none of them spoke English. She was able to translate and learn this group had just come in off of a domestic flight. They had no idea where to go, but Milagro escorted the group to baggage claim where they collected their luggage. Milagro notified her supervisor, Robert, just to my left, who stepped in and assisted. Airport operations specialist Francis was also in the area and offered to help. So Milagro, Robert, and Francis worked as a team to assist the passengers by directing them to the restroom, assisting them with food needs, and connected them with their local contact, who was arranging transportation from the airport to the hotel and running late, might I add. Francis learned that their contact was arriving to pick them up in a large charter bus, so he coordinated with SP Plus to direct traffic to the right place, and the team ensured that all the guests found their way and assisted with their last-minute needs. Although the large group was taken care of, Milagro subsequently learned there was another smaller group due an hour later. So Milagro assisted this group with all of their needs and escorted them to the bus as well. So this team effort is a great and wonderful example of customer service and how we all, often work together to solve a passenger's needs. So thanks to the 2 of you. Thanks for Francis at home. We really appreciate all your help and congratulations. Can we do one of these? All right, let's do one of those. Yeah, we'll do one of that. All right. And then last but not least, we have a special category that we reserve for an interaction that ultimately may have led to somebody having their life saved. And since we already recognized Maggie, which was another clear example of that, we had actually 2 nominations this quarter that were around that. So this particular one was a TSA employee, Josh Christian, who can't be here today, but I have a great story to read about Josh. So in the early evening of September 16th, a passenger suffered from what appeared to be a heart attack at the TSA checkpoint. A medically trained passenger stepped in to guide the TSA officers that were supporting the passenger. While another employee called the communication center, our 911 dispatch, Josh, a TSA officer, immediately ran to retrieve an automated external defibrillator, or AED. The AED is a device that can be used to assess a patient's heart rhythm and deliver a shock to reestablish an effective heart rhythm, should it be necessary. So once Josh got back to the passenger, he followed the device's instructions, placing the AED pads on the passenger's chest and administered a shock as prompted by the machine. Once the shock was administered, CPR continued. Medically trained passenger became fatigued after performing chest compressions. So Josh stepped in instantaneously, and the pair worked together until first responders arrived. Thank you, Officer Christian, for responding to and reacting quickly and working cooperatively to what ultimately led to saving this passenger's life. So congratulations to Josh. Sorry you couldn't be here, but we're really excited to recognize you as well. So thank you so much. And with that, we have completed the awards part of the presentation. Thank you all for joining us. Sorry we had to work through some technical difficulties, but it was really great to see everyone. And we've got some lunch that's waiting out in the hallway for those who could attend in person. So thank you all very much for working with us, and it's great to have you here.